you are in Raleigh working on the premiere of Bull Durham, and I want to get to that in a second, but I'm one thing that you've been tremendously open about, and I love this about you, is ADHD.
My meds
And I know there's a lot of theater kids out there who can relate.
Yep.
You say that your ADHD actually led you to the theater and to the stage. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Come on, ADHD. First of all, we out here, we in these streets. So it's so funny because, when I was coming up, when I was a kid, there wasn't necessarily, we didn't have all the information that we have about it now. So, I think that, I feel so much for my mom, and I'm so thankful for my mom with her resourcefulness, right? All she knew was she needed to find something that could focus me. And storytelling became that thing. It was, I was talking about Robin Hood Men in Tights, but it was that thing, like my mind would be in 20 different places, but you seat me in front of a movie and I'm in, right? So then a friend of hers had recommended theater, and it was Wheelock Family Theater in Boston. They're this theater right outside of Kenmore, if you know Boston, and they were doing children's theater. I think it was like Winnie the Pooh, or I think Winnie the Pooh was the first one. Charlotte's Web was the second one. But it was just all of a sudden this place where I felt a hyper focus. And they talk about, oftentimes people with ADHD, you will experience kind of, your mind might be in 20 different places about life stuff, doing the dishes, anything that kind of gives you that anxiety, whatever it is, but there might be one thing that like focuses you. And for me, that was storytelling and theater and writing and movies. And so it really was this kind of wonderful place where I think theater was the first place where I felt safe. I felt safe to kind of exist and not worry about how I appeared to people, how I was perceived by people, especially also growing up, and I talk about this often as a Black kid in Boston, like that comes with its own challenges. So theater was certainly a place where I just felt mentally and emotionally seen. And so, it didn't cure my ADHD at all. Right. It was certainly something that as the years went on, I had to, talk to therapists and a psychiatrist and for me, get medication for and figure out how I wanted to navigate the world with this thing. But theater was certainly a place where for the first time, I just felt like, yeah. And even without all those solutions, I'm okay. Do you know what I mean? Like I still have a space that sees me and that welcomes me in, and that meant the world. Yeah.
I love that you said that, and I really do believe. I have a son diagnosed with ADHD. I have a daughter on the spectrum, and I think these really are the superpowers. Like I think there are certainly challenges, but I think to find an artistic outlet or that thing, whatever it is, it could be sports, it could be anything. For my kids, it's the arts. I think really grounds you and gives you that safe space.
Absolutely. And just, if nothing else, right, just gives your mind, I think, especially for ADHD, it's almost like we're looking for a dopamine rush. We're looking for a puzzle to solve, right? And the thing you very quickly learn about life is not a puzzle. Life is an open-ended question, right? Life is a constant question. So if you're looking for the dopamine rush of fixing life, never going to happen. But the magic of a story is that a story is by inherently has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? There's a catharsis. There is a closure to story. So you can really kind of lose yourself in that sense of like, wow, like a world. If in fact we're saying that my anxiety comes from a world where I don't know what's going to happen next, and it takes me a lot longer to process that, than a world where I do know what's going to happen next is like such a balm on my spirit. Do you know what I mean? Such like a momentary relief for me, and I, even for the general audience, I think that's why theater speaks to people. Storytelling speaks to people in general. It's just that sense of like, not that you know how it ends, but just like you trust that you are watching something that's been crafted. And so much of the world isn't. So much of the world is messy and must stay that way. But stories you can kind of lose yourself in, because that's what a story is. It's crafted for you to lose yourself in it. So yeah.
Jeffrey on Facebook, he posted a comment. His family loves you, and your posts on men's health mean so much to him. And I think just your transparency and using your platforms for good is just resonates with so many of us. Not just your talent, but your person, your humanity. So I just love that.
It means a lot. Thank you, Jeffrey. It means a lot.
I had the opportunity to see you in Hamilton and Spamalot. I've seen Hamilton a couple of times, but you were my first Aaron Burr, and you will forever be Aaron Burr for me. And I really enjoyed this revival of Spamalot so much. I saw it with my family, my daughter, her first foray into the world of Monty Python. You said in an interview that Spamalot was special for you because half the people who taught you how to do what you do were in that show with you. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about how Hamilton was that training ground for you and the full circle moment coming into Spamalot?
So first of all, you were just an excellent interviewer, and you were I just love these questions. I feel very seen, because like this is awesome. And I love talking about this. So yeah, Hamilton, you have to imagine, let me set the stage for you when I come into Hamilton, and that will help you understand why Spamalot was kind of the full circle. Hamilton I was coming off of a show, Motown. I had done many, many years on Motown. And I'd done the original Broadway, and then I did the tour. And then the tour came back to Broadway. And it was very short-lived. The tour coming back to Broadway was very short-lived. I think we ran for like 3 weeks maybe. And it was like crazy. And I was getting married, and I needed a job to help pay for this wedding. So as soon as I knew I was out of a job, I was like, okay, I need to find a job. And I had booked another show that was good. It was a Broadway show. It would have been a standby role. And it was cool. And I was, it was like, oh man, okay, great. I can go back to Broadway. And then this Hamilton thing kept knocking at my door, and Hamilton had been knocking for maybe 5 years at that point. Cause I mean, since they had started with the Hamilton mixtape, like workshops, I've been going in for this thing. And I've told the story countless times, but this idea of like, I didn't consider myself a rap guy. So I was like, yeah, it's just not my thing. But then I had a friend who compared it to Shakespearean verse, and I was like, oh, I know Shakespearean verse. I studied that in NYU. That was my thing. So once I got the verse in my head and locked into it, I was like, okay. And then I booked it, and I was like, thank God I can pay for my wedding. And from the get, Lynn and everyone in that office was so kind. It was like my first day. I walk in, and you have to imagine, this is right after the Tonys. Like this is the show. And I have friends in it, but like, I'm also knowing that like the friends that I have in it were one person 4 months ago, and now post Hamilton Tonys are in a completely different stratosphere of their lives. But I walk in, the first thing that happens is Sasha Hutchings, who's one of my best friends, is blowing bubbles in my face and throwing like confetti at me. I walk into the office, Lynn's eating like a slice of pizza. He's like, oh, hey man, like welcome to the family. And David's just sitting there like chilling, like, hey man, what's up? And it was just like this, like, it just felt, it was just this very surreal, like, what is going on here? Like, y'all, this is just like a party house. Like, what is happening? And it truly, I think what was hitting me, what I was feeling so much was like this sense of these people who had worked their butts off to create this piece of theater, who had taken their time creating this piece of theater, and it had finally been recognized in the way that they'd all hoped and dreamed. And now they could just enjoy it. And it was like hitting a lottery. And I was an understudy at Bright. I was the Burr understudy at that point. But it was just like, what a perfect place to learn how to navigate a successful Broadway show. Like what a place to learn and how to navigate like all the feelings and emotions that come with that. It was with people who I came up with, like Donald, like everyone who ended up in Hamilton. We used to call it Hamotown because it was like there was a period when it was like me, Brandon Victor Dixon, Donald Weber, Nick Christopher, Javon McFerrin, like Cindy Winters, Crystal Joy Brown, like everyone who come through Motown came through Hamilton at the same time. It was almost like we were all expats, and we just ended up in this world, and it just felt good. It felt like we were doing good art. It felt like the audiences were happy, and it felt like we took care of each other. And then obviously you bring in the James Monroe Igle heart of it, and it all falls apart, and everything goes to hell. But it was also that because James and Chris Jackson very much became like my big brothers, and whether I wanted them or not. So this, I spend the first, my early Hamilton days looking up to them. I take over as Burr on the tour, and the people I'm calling are Chris and James. Like, how do you lead a company? I'd never led a company before like that, not on a show that big. How do you do this? And the advice they gave me was invaluable. James talked about this concept of like, he just really pointed out the humanity of leading a show. The idea of like, look, you're going to have your A show, your B show, your C show, your D show. Your A show is when your voice is exactly where you want it to be. Your body is feeling good. You've eaten right. You've slept. You're hydrated. Like you're good to go. A show's great. You can hit those high notes, no problem. B show, okay, like maybe you're a little tired, but like nothing's gonna take you out. But you're doing it. C show, okay, you're a little sick, or like not like maybe not like COVID sick, because COVID sick, don't be in the building. But like you're feeling a little under, but maybe you have like an important studio executives in the audience that night, and you're not going to miss that show. So pace yourself. And your D show is like, you probably shouldn't be in that show tonight, but if you're going to be in that show tonight, like how are you going to navigate it? How are you going to take the space for yourself and make the grace for yourself so that you can be like, ooh, it's not going to be a perfect show, but can I do the show that at least doesn't detract from the show, doesn't harm anybody or myself, doesn't harm the company, doesn't take away the audience's experience? Can I do that show? And that might be your D show, right? And you don't, it's very rare you'd have a D show, right? If you're at a D, call out, like don't do the show. But it was just that, I think, because when you take over as the lead, there's such a pressure to, it has to be perfect. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never, ever, ever going to be perfect. So relieving yourself of that need to make it the thing, I think was the biggest lesson. And James taught me that. And Chris Jackson just makes fun of me all the time. So like he just took the piss. And so I never had any ego to speak of because Chris would just rip it out from under me as soon as I had one. So then we get to spam a lot. And, I'm standing on stage with James. I'm standing on stage with Taryn, who came into the Hamilton family, my first couple months there as King George. And he is, I've loved his work on SNL, but like, he also was like, it was like, when you grew up like a nerd and you see another nerd who made it, you're like, oh, you made it. We're here. And he was that, like, the first conversation we had was Star Wars. And he threw a snob Saturday Night on Broadway party in his dressing room. And it was me, him, and my wife, Sarah, just talking about Star Wars in his dressing room for like an hour while like this party's raging around us. And I was like, I like you. I'd like to be your friend. And here we are. And it was really crazy because I was actually kind of responsible for getting him that job. Because Alex Brightman, who did the role in DC, who's also my writing partner at Warner Brothers, he was doing Shark is Broken. So he needed someone. He was like, I can't do the opening. I have to come in a little later. And I literally was like, as soon as I knew that was like, Taryn would be perfect for this. So I literally called my director. I called Jeffrey Finn, our wonderful producer. And I was like, hey guys, I don't know if you know Taryn, and it happened. And it was just like, to be like, and it was also that idea of like being in a position, thinking back to my beginning of Hamilton, where I'm like wide-eyed understudy, just like, okay, to now like being able to kind of in some way influence who gets cast in a show. And I think that was what was wonderful about Spamalot, was kind of this coming into this place of like owning like, okay, this is where we are now. This is a very different place. Like, and I'm not a celebrity, but like, I'm certainly not where I started. And so this is interesting. Can we, and how can we make sure that we enjoy this? Because the only crime would be if we didn't enjoy this moment. And it was very easy to do because I was on stage with my friends. It truly was just, I honestly, especially those first 4 months, I can't think of a time when we weren't just laughing our butts off on stage, backstage. It was just joy. It was truly just like a group, and like the group thread's still going. Like it's still like every time somebody books something, we're always like, hey, congratulations. Like, so I'm so thankful for that special moment. And I think that Hamilton, this is a very long and winding story, so thank you for sticking with me on it. But the condensed version is, I think Hamilton prepared me for it simply because through Hamilton, I was able to see what a joyous building looks like, how to genuinely contribute to that joy. And then with Spamalot, when I was one of the people who was expected to kind of help maintain the joy, it was like, okay, cool. I remember what it was to just kind of, it was authenticity. You walk into Lin eating a slice of pizza in his office when he's Lin-Manuel Miranda is the most Lin thing that he could do. And he's himself. That's joy, right? Just the freedom to be yourself is joy. So just helping people be themselves, I think is part of your job as a leader of a company. Yeah, so that's what I aspired to do. I hope I did.
I love that so much. You mentioned being a nerd. You are a film fanatic, so much like Spamalot, which was inspired by this iconic film. So is Bull Durham. Bull Durham came out in 1988. It's hard to believe. But as a self-proclaimed cinephile, where does Bull Durham sit on your list of films? Top 10, top 100?
It's certainly top 20. It's one of those. Bull Durham, right? I think, when you meet Ron Shelton, who's our amazing book writer, you realize very quickly that he is Crash Davis. That's it. Just and Ron Shelton is, if you don't know him, he wrote every sports movie from the 90s that you love. He wrote this. He wrote Tin Cup. He wrote White Men Can't Jump. He is prolific, and he's a brilliant writer, and he knows how athletes speak and think. And he's just great at putting it on screen. And he grew up on, you talk to him, he grew up on Bergman films and Westerns. Like, he is very much that kind of like, of that John Wayne generation. But I actually, he's more like a Sergio Leone. He's like a Clint Eastwood. That's where he more fits. Like, he's Man with No Name. And he actually, if you talk to him, it's so funny because he talks about how in his mind, Bull Durham is a Western. Right, it's a ball player. We don't know where he's from, who gets hired on to do a job and then gets kicked out when he's done with it. Right, like it's a Western. So it not only does it sit high on my list, what's also crazy about it is, speaking quite candidly, when I got the offer to do this, I had to do it for two reasons. Well, three. Mark Bruni and Josh Bergas. That I love their work and I want to work with them. Carmen Cusack, because my buddy Paul Nolan worked with her on Bright Star, and he has said to me maybe every time we meet up that she is the best actress he's ever worked with. And I was like, I need to just learn from this person. And I'll tell you, spoiler alert, she's I mean, her work is stunning. And the third reason being, this was a role that as a young Black kid, I was like, ooh, that's amazing. And I will never get to do that. I will never get to be that Han Solo gunslinger type. They don't let black kids do that. They don't. That's just not who we are. That's not who we are in this public sphere. So if you're telling me that I can essentially play the Han Solo of baseball, like I'm not like there's actually I was the easiest when I got that call. I was like, oh, that's the easiest yes in the world. I actually have. There's nothing that's going to stop me from being present for this thing, and to the point where like because there's a week of overlap. So Bull Durham rehearsal started a week before A Little Night Music, or 2 weeks before A Little Night Music ended. So I was flying in on my days off to rehearse Bull Durham and go back to time. I mean, I was like, I'm not going to miss this. I'm not going to miss this. So it definitely is like, it's not only a movie that I love, but it's just a role that I love and just an archetype that I never thought I'd get to do. I never thought I'd get to give my take on it. So I'm so honored that they would let me, it truly is kind of I'm not being cliche. It's a pinch myself. It's just like, I don't believe I'm here. This is very wild. This is very wild to me. So, yeah.
I love so much that you said that. Folks who follow Beltline to Broadway know that we have a lot of conversations about representation on stage. And over the pandemic, we spoke a lot about racism in theater and representation in theater. And in your spare time, you're an adjunct professor at NYU. You said you're not ruining the lives of the kids. I promise.
I just got an email from a student today, and he was asking some advice, and I was like, I'm going to give you this advice, but I just hope that because you feel such a responsibility. Like, they trust these kids, and if any of my students are watching this, I've said this is nothing I haven't said to you already, but like they come to you and they expect that you know what you're doing. And like the first thing I say is, I just want to be clear. I have no idea. Like I'm making this up as I go along. If you think I have any sort of like concept of like, but I think there is, it's been fun to be a professor because it does two things. You are forced to kind of reckon with, well, how have I been doing this? Like, what is this thing, that has seemingly worked a couple of times. And what's lovely is you really do get to lean into how much you don't know. I think my favorite professors when I was coming up in NYU were the professors that were like, I don't know, let's see. Right. Because it's not so much about having the information as it is being unafraid to ask the question. I think that is the difference. Allowing a student to discover for themselves, which takes more time, absolutely takes more time. And, when you have goals you need to hit and a syllabus and curriculum and all these things, like definitely gets harder. But like the moments when you can just at least encourage that thing of like, let's find out, let's discover it. That I think sticks with the student more than any piece of information you can give to them when they own it for themselves. Yeah.
I love that so much. And you've said that your students, particularly your students of color, have much more freedom as they move about this theatrical space than you had as a kid coming up in this industry.
Yeah.
So are we making progress when it comes to representation and opportunities?
Yes. I think yes. And I want to say that I'm saying that emphatically because I'm what I'm thinking of is not a caveat, but just kind of I'm assessing as I'm saying. For me, it does feel that way. It does feel that way. That said, there's still a lot of ways to go, right? There's still a lot of things. Whenever it is about faster, cheaper, in I don't care what industry you're in, faster, cheaper, whenever it's about faster, cheaper, somebody's going to get left off the bus. That's just the nature of it. Because you're not taking the time, right? I think the dark secret of inclusion is that inclusion does in fact take more time. Inclusion does in fact take slowing down. inclusion means that this thing that you want to do because commerce and capitalism asks you to do it might not be ready to do when you want it to be done. And yet, in the effort of making sure that you are doing what you say you want to do, which is making an equal playing field for everyone, oftentimes it is worth it to slow down. I've been thinking, honestly about, the things that as I get older, the things that I'm going to have to slow down for. Right now, I'm in a space as a middle-aged millennial where, my generation is kind of starting to, lose our set on the trends, right? Like we set the trends for a while, and now it's Gen Z, right? Now it's somebody coming up behind us. So the things that we thought would be just the things are no longer the things. And part of my job is to, as a not even a professor or whatever, but just like a civilian in society, a contributor to society, is to make space for what those things are, mm-hmm. and understand they're not my things, right? And maybe even take the time to learn what those things are, and not try to co-opt them with an agenda so that I can show that, like, oh, I know your things. It's like, no, they're your things. And maybe and there comes a time when you listen as opposed to produce. And I think that is so much of inclusion. Just the idea of like, yeah, I understand how it was done in your day. I understand how it's done in your world, but there are worlds that have nothing to do with your world. And if in fact you want them included, as you say, as people often say they do, you need to slow down. So I think the concept of slowing down can be extremely scary for some people. Bring it full circle, for someone with ADHD, that is a death sentence. Tell me to slow down. My God, I don't know what that means, right? And yet, it is so necessary to everything that we as a society have often professed to want to do. So, yeah, I think that it is getting better. I just think that in those moments, I think the moments that are still sticking for me are the moments when I do see people rushing ahead. And that's not a bad thing inherently. It's just the thing of like, I am always, my prayer to my students, for my students, is that in those moments when somebody's rushed ahead of them, that they won't be the only ones having to raise their hand and advocate, that somebody else will be with them, that they will never be alone in that advocacy. Because that's actually the only hard part of advocacy is if you have to do it alone. If there's nobody standing with you, not even standing in front of you, standing with you, being like, no, I see it too. That's actually all it needs to be. So yeah, if that makes sense.
100%. And I think too, advocacy and inclusion means, in my opinion, letting go of fear. And that is, when you have millions of dollars behind a production, that's not an easy thing to do.
Here's what's okay. I'm going to say something that's crazy. It's not an easy thing to do. And yet, if we're talking about commercial theater is a casino. It's a casino. We know this. We know that, like, it's the most powerful, moving, emotional, cathartic, funny casino in the world. But it is a gamble. If you're talking about being a producer, we know you're rolling the dice on these things. We know. So the only way, if we're going to a real casino, Las Vegas, if you don't want to be that person who's like being hunted down by the loan sharks, then it better be expendable income. It better be money that you're willing to lose on this thing, not because it can't all be about the gain. Some things you just do because like you have the capital to do it. It's the right thing to do. So I always, yes, it is scary, but if it's that scary, I question like, well, then how did you prep for this? Because we've been here for 70 years. You know what this is. Most of these shows don't work. Yeah. So like, what did you think this was? What did you convince yourself this was? It really does speak to, and again, I'm not trying to be on a freaking soapbox, but it's like, that's why I think about a national endowment for the arts. You know what I mean? Like, that's the point. This is not a place to make money. It's just not. That's very rare here. And if you try to make it into that, well, then it becomes something else. This is a place for culture. Do you mean like New Orleans isn't New Orleans because New Orleans is franchised. New Orleans is New Orleans because that's where you go to hear the music. It's New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Do you mean? And I'll, again, off my soapbox, but I'm just like, yo, what did you think? What did you think?
What were you thinking? You called yourself a middle-aged millennial, so this is not me calling. If you're just joining us, I'm not calling Nick Walker a middle-aged. He called himself that. But as a middle-aged millennial, from what I've seen on social media, choreography, the physicality of Bull Durham is no joke. This show is very physical. You all are dancing, throwing bats up in the air, and the physicality is what's really striking me. And if you don't follow Theater Raleigh on social media, please follow Theater Raleigh on social media because it's really fun to see the behind the scenes. How do you prepare physically for a role like this? Because I feel like night music is all about the vocal athleticism, and this is a very physical show.
What's wonderful, I think, it's so crazy because, talk to me in 3 weeks and ask me how my knees are doing. But what I will say right now is, I get kind of a pass because that's the whole point of my character, is that he is on the older side of this baseball life, right? So like this idea of somebody who doesn't necessarily have that same spring in his step is not as like it kind of plays into the character. However, I think that also, I will say to their credit, Josh and Mark are extremely smart about the moves they have me do and don't do, right? Like the things these boys are doing in the show are wild. Like, it's insane. I don't do 90% of those things. The bat tricks I do the tossing the bat tricks up in there, but that's much more, doable for me. Like and keep in mind, like, I think about like all the I'm 36. Think about like all the 40 plus men who've been jumping off that burr table, for years at a time. Like, it's possible. You gotta prep. You gotta know what you're going into. So I will say, like, worked with my trainer, right? And said, okay, so I'm playing a catcher. So that means a lot of time in a squatting position. So can we really build up, like, posterior chain muscles? Can we do all those things? And eating right, and like drinking a lot of water, getting a lot of sleep, stretching, like all the things you can do. But I think that what I love about a moment like this, like the show is so well constructed that you actually feel really taken care of doing it. Like, it doesn't, everyone has a lot to do, but it's so well spaced out that nobody, maybe except for Carmen, who's like literally owning the stage every second, nobody really feels like pushed to their brink. It's like, it's so, everyone has their thing and then has a rest, and that's lovely. So that helps. And then also, I think that for me, Crash, my character in particular, if you've seen the movie, like I said, he's a lone gunslinger. It's so much of his stuff is so 90% of what I do on stage is just take the piss. Like, that's what my character does, is just take, be a smart aleck and take the piss out of scenes. And so it's more, I find that my job is actually listening. That's actually the hardest part of my job in the show, is just active listening. That sense of like, okay, I'm in a scene with Carmen, I'm in a scene with John, who's hysterical in the show. And just like listening to them, seeing where they're at that day. And then like, how can I send this line in just the right way that I can get them to crack? And moving on. Like, that's actually, it's more math. It's math, which is ironic because baseball is math, right? That's the thing that I think I've learned more than anything doing this show, is like how smart these guys are. And I knew that, but I didn't know that. Like, I didn't understand that when you are at the batter's box, like you're not only watching the pitcher for how they're going to throw it now, you're also in your mind, like that's what Teddy Williams used to do, is calculate the sequence of like the pitches that came before him, right? Like, so these guys are scientists. They are physical scientists. And I think that part of it allows me to not have to worry so much about like, okay, I'm in the body of a ball player. It's like, no, this is all math. Everything Crash is doing is about the math of the game. So that enables me to kind of reserve my energy when I need to and use it when I need to. And, and again, they've just, I'm not saying this because like my job is to promote the show. I really am not. Even though my job is to promote the show. This show is so special. The show is so special. And we've all kind of had these, me and Carmen have been hanging out a lot because we carpool in together, and we just, every time we're in the car together, we're just like, this would be a good gig. It's one of those shows that you do and you're like, it just feels right. It sits right. It's fun. It's sexy. It's funny, and it's dramatic, and it's just like, it's classic. It just feels like a good classic musical, with a lot of cuss words and baseball and just like ridiculous things. But yeah, nothing so far has felt out of my comfort zone. It's all felt like I'm right where I want to be. Like, it's good. It's in the pocket, which is nice.
And I will say, I know the hope is that this does go to Broadway, and everyone's kind of treating this as an out of town tryout, so to speak. So the show did have a short life at the Alliance, and this is kind of a new adaptation. Same writers, but they're revisiting it.
Yes.
And so we do hope it goes to Broadway. And one thing that's been fun to watch is you're all spending a lot of time at the Durham Bulls Stadium. But have you been to the old stadium where the movie was?
Not yet, and I have to go. We've done the Bulls, and we spent a lot of time at Bulls. But no, haven't been to the old one. And it's so funny too, because like growing, like I'm from Boston, like so like I'm a Fenway guy, right? So like, but it's so crazy as I've explored the new stadium here, like, down by the American Tobacco, like it's just such a beautiful ballpark. It's just gorgeous. And I'm sure the old one is too, like, and it's because they just all have that, there's just that, it's community. Like, it's just like you're in there, and it feels good. Yeah. I'm excited to get to see a little more of it.
The old one's very gritty, but the new ballpark, truly, between the new ballpark and the Durham Performing Arts Center, it's completely revitalized Durham, downtown Durham. It's amazing. Wow. I read an article where you said you had 3 strikes against you in high school, elementary school: your ADHD, your nerdum, which I love, and the fact that you're the only Black kid in a predominantly white school.
Yep.
Knowing what you know now, what would you say to that kid in school?
Oh.
What advice would you give to him?
Oh, man. I would hope. There's no way to tell him. That's what sucks about advice, right? Is like, you can say it, but like, there's no way. You have to, again, he has to own it for himself. I would say that I hope you know you're enough. Just you as you are. I think that's been the thing. That's been the thing that's most moving about all these adventures so far, is like, none of them happen when I'm trying to make them happen. Right? Every really cool thing that's happened to me has happened in that moment when I'm just sitting, just trying really hard to just exist. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call and something says, "Hey, come try this thing." I'm like, all right. and then it becomes something. It becomes something, or it doesn't, right? Like it was just, it stayed at a cool little thing or a big thing, or but just that I think that my younger self still wants so badly to make things happen in the way that will make him happiest, that will make his mom happiest, that will make his wife happiest, that will solve everything. And instead of solving, I would just encourage him to daydream. Just dream for a second. Don't stop trying to fix everything. You're enough. You're just you as you are. Existing is actually more powerful than you'll ever know. Because I think that's what the marginalization takes away from you, right? Is that sense of feeling like you belong, like you're enough, but you always are, no matter who you are. So that's what I would want to say that to him. Yeah.
I love that so much. I want to let people know, Bull Durham runs from September 10th to the 22nd in Durham, North Carolina. Hopefully, we will see it on Broadway down the road. I also feel like A Little Night Music may have a revival in store because that was an incredible cast as well. Kathleen Turner, Julia Murney, and wonderful. Stephen.
I will say, wait, just to pause. If you haven't gone, if you need to just have a joy in your morning, go and watch the highlight reel from Our Little Night Music and watch Stephen Telsey sing as Henrik in the trio. It's stunning. I mean, everyone, Mike McGowan and Lauren in that trio were incredible. Stephen Telsey, I literally wanted to rip his vocal cords out of his face and just be like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense, Stephen. This is absurd.
He's such a talent. So I do hope we do see a revival of that. You're just involved in so many great projects. So I'm so excited to see the show. I'm coming, I think, September 12th or something. And I hope I can meet you in person.
Please let me know. Please, hit me up. Let me know when you're coming. Please remind me because I would love to meet you. Love to say hi.
Definitely have to say hi. Thank you all for watching and spending your lunch with us. This has been a joyful conversation. If you joined late, as soon as we log off, you will be able to watch the whole thing from the beginning. And again, please support Theatre Raleigh and the good work they're doing. Bull Durham runs September 10th through the 22nd. I'll put the links everywhere. And Nick, thank you so much. I love this conversation.
Pleasure.
Nick, stick with me for a second. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you at the theater.